So thank you everyone for attending the session. Based on what Stacy said, I expect people will be drifting in over the next few minutes. It's my pleasure to introduce Michael Spayd, who is the Chief Executive of the Agile Coaching Institute. He is passionate about techniques for coaching and developing organizations, leaders and teams. He has worked as an organizational change coach and consultant for more than 20 years, working with Fortune 500, small businesses and non-profits. For 13 years, he has specialized in large-scale agile transformation efforts, working with numerous organizations, leaders and teams in that whole time. He's currently writing a book in the Mike Cohn series called Coaching in the Agile Enterprise. Thank you.
How are you guys doing? Good. Not too bad. Gosh, this is a small enough session we can introduce ourselves. I don't want to get carried away, but maybe name and company and role. Can we do that?
Chris Gagne, tagged Agile Coach.
I'm BSP Scrum Master.
Andrew Webster, Solutions IQ, Agile Coach.
Also, Swami, Agile Coach and Development.
And Devin.
Stacey Gordon, Salesforce, Agile Coach.
Sean Lemson, Co-Action Coaching, Agile Coach.
Steve Sanoff, PayPal. I run the Agile practice here in data technology.
Joel Mankoff Connors, Program Manager here at EMC.
Oh, me. I'm Vandana Roy, and I'm Scrum Master with Visa.
Back there? Your name, role, and company?
So, Sia Gilbert, Ericsson, and Change Manager.
Good morning, David Bacon, Agile Coach at PayPal.
Okay. Would you close the door for at least pull it to?
David Chilcott, Confirmations, Agile Coach.
Cool. So thanks for coming. I've been experimenting with this material for a while now. Actually, anybody here, at least in my talk last year here? You did?
Very cool.
Yeah. So there's some similar material, not a whole, well, very different form. If you've ever, anybody here written a book? It's a bad idea. My suggestion would be don't, unless you really have to. And I have to. So here I am. It's been a many-year process for me. I've been working with enterprise-level issues in Agile since the very beginning because I got involved in a very large-scale XP implementation back in 2001 when Agile was like really cutting edge and people were nuts. And we got a CIO in this big telecommunications company that was nuts, and he thought that all these telecommunications teams could become XP teams and move from 15-month cycles to 90-day cycles all at once.
How'd that work?
Well, it depends on what point of view you're taking. So from my point of view, as a student of large-scale organizational change and seeing lots of experiments, many of them failed, some of which worked mediocre, some of which worked quite well, fascinating. From the point of view of shareholders, maybe not as much. But it was, you learn more from failure than you do from success sometimes, at least in some measure. So, then I continued doing that, working at, management levels and at team levels and at, executive levels and with HR issues and facilities issues and, all the kind of things that you're probably quite aware of at this point. But I'm a collector of models, and there's nothing so practical as good theory, as Kurt Lewin said. And I'm a synthesizer of models and of different perspectives and ways of thinking about things. And I've been searching for a long time I've been presenting at Agile conferences since 2003, and bringing in different models from the rest of the world, a lot from the organizational development world, from the professional coaching world, from the world of change management. And struggled with, how can you get, one of my favorite quotes is by Einstein. I'm trying to memorize the exact quote, but it's something to the effect of, I wouldn't give a whit for the simplicity that's on this side of complexity, but I would give my life for the simplicity on the other side of complexity. So that's what I've been looking for, is that something that didn't reduce the complexity, and flatland it, but something that captured in a reasonably understandable way all the complexity that happens in organizations. That's the name of the book I'm writing. And some of it is, I've released the first 4 chapters, and to some people, 5 chapters also, which is all the material here is comprehensively on our website, AgileCoachinginstitute.com. It's a tough read. I've tried to make it as understandable as possible, but it's a reasonably complex system to understand the whole complexity of what goes on in an enterprise. Like I said, the simplicity on the other side of complexity. I've organized this talk. The title is "What Would It Mean to Coach an Agile Enterprise?" Because that's a big term. It's a popular concept. Enterprise agility is. I'm assuming that you're interested in that enterprise agile space. Is that the way it came? You heard I was good looking, maybe.
Where's Brad Pitt?
What?
Where's Brad Pitt?
Where you at?
Where's Brad Pitt?
Yeah, yeah, that was the picture, wasn't it, on my? This is perhaps could be a little bit of a disappointing talk for some of you. It's a little bit like in the next instantiation of it, I'm going to have a red pill and a blue pill. Taking the blue pill, if you remember the Matrix, would mean walking out the door right. Taking the red pill and seeing the Matrix for what it is, actually that's not a bad metaphor for I'll leave it at that and see what you think. So if we don't know what the client is actually like, we need a framework, a map to understand what the client is actually like, and we need a similar thing to understand what the different tools, because there's a lot of different tools, aren't there, out there that purport to enterprise agility. A lot of different approaches, and how can one of them be right? They're all wrong in part, and they're all right in part. And how is that true? What sense does that make? And kind of most importantly, knowing yourself. Especially in the work of transformation, there's nothing that's more important or useful or powerful than the instrument right here. So, you probably know the version 1 survey about barriers to agile adoption. And this is the same list every year, not the whole list, but the top of the list, the worst part of it, the most difficult part of it is always the same. Ability to change organizational culture combined with general resistance to change, management support. All issues that have exactly nothing to do with Agile right there. Nothing to do with that, really has to do with our ability to change ourselves, other people, our organization, our culture. And if you think about just to remind you of the complexity of organizations, think about how the structure affects things, how people are organized and who reports to whom, and then therefore what interests they have, what measures they have. There's different cultures within, just a silo, right, or a functional group or a team or whatever. There's, the overlay of a bunch of people striving to, have mastery, to get promoted, to get rewards, get satisfaction, that are all different, right? We're motivated differently. There's process issues of, how we do things procedurally or, kind of related to culture. You have the junior high school kind of overlay. Who's in the in-group, who's in the out-group. And, what's the leadership style? What's the senior leader like? The senior leader sets a huge tone for an organization, right? And within any given unit, the leader sets a huge tone for the organization, and together they form a certain kind of a thing, culture. So there's a lot of things to understand. That's why having a simple, simplistic, I would dare say, approach to enterprise agility is not going to work. For me, it's insulting to think that one kind of a thing. And so this is really more of like a meta map of how to see everything together. And if you think about, this is some work that has been done on enterprise coaching. And it's got a lot of different learning objectives to it. This is just at the highest level. This is not even, that's maybe the titles of them. And, there's a lot of significant issues about change strategy and culture and the change process and working with executives versus working with teams and, process and facilitating that way. So there's lots of, just as a reminder of the complexity that's out there. Hello. So let's dive into the client. So it's really different if you're working at the, I should have built this from the bottom. It's really different if you're, how many people really familiar with working at team level? You work with a lot of teams. How about with a program that's all of a piece? You have a lot of experience with that. Different? Relationship, but not the same. Would you agree? So different things you got to keep in mind. And then if you go to the organization level, how many people have a lot of experience working across the organization level? That's different still, isn't it?
Very much.
Different dynamics, different kinds of factors. They're different, hold-ons of stuff, and they work differently. The logic is not completely, but it's definitely, so some of it is like, where are we working? What are we focusing on? What should we focus on? Should we focus on teams and then repeat, and then that just creates something, should we focus at an organizational level and hope that things rain down somehow? So that's one kind of level of complexity that we need to pay attention to. Okay, so this is probably the longest single slide in the deck. I want to take you on a bit of a tour of both people and organizational culture and societal culture, and different styles of doing that, really different developmental levels. This is from a whole field of study called spiral dynamics. Anybody familiar with spiral dynamics? And specifically from the work of Claire Graves, who's the man who worked in the 60s and 70s and into the 80s discovering this. He was trying to answer the question, what is a mature person? And what is human personality about? And the reason that I really appreciate him so much is he did experiments over the course of at least 12 years, and he repeated the same basic thing over and over again with different subjects and with different judges that were assessing what they were finding. And he was only the kind of facilitator, orchestrator of it. He didn't have a theory. He was really, his research question was, somebody asked him in a personality class he taught one year, so which one is right? Of all, Freud and Alport and, Jung and all these people. And he was like, I don't know. And so he created a kind of a classroom laboratory, and he had people write down over a long period of time, over like 4 weeks, what's a mature person in your definition? What does a mature person mean? And he had them do that for about a month, and then he had them critiqued in a group. He had them then revise it for another 4 weeks, so that it went through a test. It was not just a quick, dash off a quick answer about it, but it was really kind of thinking about it a lot. And then he had independent judges group those different conceptions that people had written into different categories. Can you, he didn't know if it could be done, but he said, let's group those into different groups. And he found basically 5 different groups. These are, I'm not going to talk about these, but there's things that go before, archaic and magical worldviews back from a long, long time ago. One of the groups, he didn't call it this. He called it something very, very strange, but we label it with colors. They don't mean anything per se, but they have they help us remember, what the quality is. Red is, you won't find for the most part in modern organizations, except for illegal ones. So gangs, organized crime. You do find it in some parts of the world, Middle East, Africa, places where leaders rule by fear, intimidation, by physical fear, by keeping a network of people who will literally stab each other in the back. You're watching her and she's watching this guy. And, Saddam Hussein is a quintessential leader in this kind of a space. Now, that's a darn sight better than, or more sophisticated than purple was, where we sacrifice people so that the gods don't, throw thunderbolts down at us. Much more sophisticated, beginning of the kings and empires. And some people, getting power and the fear of shame is the primary driver for people like this. Not much part of a marginalized part of our modern world. Next one, the color is amber, or in spiral dynamics is actually blue, but this is the integral. We'll talk about that in a little bit. This comes online about 4,000 years ago in people, but it also comes online. This is in human development. People develop through the same, in the same frame that the species developed. It's called ontogeny, recapitulates phylogeny, if you remember that from developmental psychology or biology. So red is like a 2-year-old, 3-year-old. Anybody ever had a 2 or 3-year-old? They're about power and getting their way, right? And they're the emperor of the world. Amber happens more in like 8, 10, 12-year-olds, where it's about the rules. It's about following prescriptions. It's about that there's a right way. In a religious context, this is the literal interpretation of various sacred texts, where the world was really invented in 7 days, or Moses really did part the Red Seas, very literally. And there's in an organizational context, this is very tradition-oriented, it's very rule-following, it's very hierarchical. And when Graves got people that held this kind of conception together, because he followed them, he had the luxury of, he had them 1 year, and then they came back to a different class the next year. He had many people like that, and he knew what group they were in, what conception they had, but you know, he never talked to them about that. And so he watched these people, and these people organize themselves into hierarchies, interestingly. Always into two, and they never argued between, they argued at the same level of the hierarchy, so the bottom could, you know, dispute, or the middle could, or the top could, but not, they didn't go laterally. You know, like in an organization where you don't talk to your boss's boss, and you really don't talk to, you know, the boss's boss in the other chain. You go up your chain and down another. That's an amber kind of structure that some organizations still carry over. So some organizations are decidedly organized at an amber kind of a level. The next level up, or this, and also in terms of psychology, this is a conformist. It's called in developmental psychology the socialized mind. I look to others to define my role. I try to fit into a social system. I want to adapt to what other people say because I don't want to be rejected from the group. You know, you may recognize some hints of that still in some of your companies. If you have a big bureaucracy, there may be quite a lot of that. Orange, this is starts to be, it came about at the Age of Enlightenment and the French and American Revolution. The idea of freedom and of individual will and so forth. And that, most of corporate America is organized around this. The U.S., it's the general kind of meme in the U.S. Population altogether. The corporate innovations here were innovation. Being able to scale, actually the big place of scale was here. So when you were organized this way, you couldn't do things like build pyramids. You had to be organized in the amber mode to have big scale where you could have, you know, regiments and rule followers and, you know, Frederick Taylor, totally amber kind of an approach. Well, kind of mixed with some orange in terms of the scientific method. This is a very empirically driven, it's where science starts to predominate over religion in terms of being a different worldview and a competing worldview. Kind of. You're getting a sense of this. So people develop from one to the next. They don't skip levels, and they may stop if your life circumstances work with you organized in an amber kind of way. Then there's no reason to change, is there? I mean, you know, just like anything, we change because how we're organized doesn't work. Green starts to be pluralistic. I start to be able to take other people's perspectives and see them as equally valid as mine. This is where you have relativism and pluralism and a somewhat not great implication of this is political correctness. Political correctness is a very green kind of thing. That's a little bit green going out of control, just like greed is orange going out of control. That's an orange thing, and it's just a little unhealthy, it's a little unbalanced. And then finally, Skippa. These were all graves called first tier because they had a certain survivalistic quality. And this is now the second tier. And there's a fundamental difference because everybody here, when green will think that orange is greedy and amber is rigid and bureaucratic. And orange will think that amber is too you know, limited or bureaucratic maybe, and they'll think that green are crazy. There's a war. Actually, this plays out, this dynamic, the three of these play out in the American political system as, you know, the culture wars. It's the arguing of different value means with each other, essentially. At Teal, things start to get different because you start to see that, you know, each level of the spiral, this was described by Graves as a spiral that goes back and forth, moves up. There's value in any of those. There's reasonableness to being at any level. It's not a problem to, you know, just like you wouldn't, you know, like a child, a young child can't see that if you show them a cube that on this side is yellow and on this side is green, and you turn it around and show them the green side and say, okay, now I'm going to turn the cube this way. What color am I seeing? And you'd say green, and they say yellow, because that's what they're seeing. So they don't have the ability to see, to take your perspective. So you wouldn't say, well, that's a bad child. That child, we need to incarcerate that child. Right? Or we'd say, yeah, that's the developmental level that they're at. That's kind of interesting, actually. And at Teal, we start to have that kind of perspective on things. And, yeah, well, that's the developmental level that works for them. That's where they're at. That's where they live. That's kind of their culture. Okay, so that's a little bit of a overlay. So here's how this is distributed in the Western world. This is probably not worldwide. This is kind of some sense of it. Very little red in our world. A fair amount of amber, even more orange. Reasonable amount, but definitely minority of green. And teal's way down there at 7%. Okay, pretty low. Now, for us, that's sort of bad news. Because, actually I'm going to go switch over to that right now. If we think about how these would manifest in Agile, yeah.
Did you say it's spiral something? Sorry.
Say what?
The keyword that you said, I missed that.
Spiral.
Spiral. Okay.
So how Agile manifests at these different organization culture or individual personality levels is fairly different. So in tradition-driven Agile, I call it, at Amber, if you look at how the manifesto plays out, they really do value documentation over working software because it's following rules, and rules are important. Rules create structure, and they help us stay in control, and they're defined by authorities that actually know what they're doing, and we respect authorities, and like one does in a sort of formal religion quality, the priest or the head or something is right and has the rules of the intermediary for God. They would rather follow a plan over respond to change. And even if they adopt Agile, they're not going to be able to be Agile because that's just not how that thinking style works. So you're going to have a problem if you're implementing Agile in a Amber organization or with Amber people. It's going to fly in the face of that. And you see it. You're probably going to have more success with a certain style of Kanban. You're probably not going to get everything you really want, but there's much less cultural change necessary in the Kanban implementation. There's going to be some more, kind of by the book kind of quality. You're not going to have to disrupt things so much. Now, in results driven at Orange, this is potentially the paradigm case or the most frequent case, the modal case, because most of corporate America is organized at Orange primarily. Definitely some pieces of green, some pieces of amber, but the fundamental, if you think about it as what lights up, we talk about what level of the spiral are they lighting up. We all have all these possibilities in us, else they couldn't happen. Given life conditions, we evolve in a certain way. So here, Orange is very pragmatic, and it's going to like working software with comprehensive documentation because that's actually what customers pay for, and that's going to resonate strongly there. But contract negotiation, customer collaboration, not so much. But that sounds good, but that actually could affect the bottom line, not necessarily. But we're going to be able to do that. And here's where you see, when you tap into what Orange cares about, results, saving money, nominal customer satisfaction, doing more with less, to the extent that Agile can fit into those needs and desires, values of Orange, it's going to work pretty well. When it starts to cross over into some areas, like you'll see in the next one, not so much. That's where you're going to get a fair amount of resistance. Now here is where Agilists start to light up, because Agile is not an Orange paradigm, as you can probably guess. It's completely not an Orange paradigm. Green is going to love focusing on people and the underlying values because green is purpose-driven or even more values-driven. That's where, all companies are big on having values statements these days. But how many of them are like utter pablum bullshit that just leave everybody cold and, that's crap. You know what I'm talking about? But then there's some organizations that actually there's a vibrancy about it and actually it feels really genuine. And, Ben & Jerry's is a good example of a green organization. They have that. Many green organizations are actually nonprofits, which kind of makes sense for what green values. So anything though, owning their own estimates, making their own technical decisions, flat organization, green's going to love that. That's going to be a high resonance. It's going to go into a green organization quite easily. The downside is when Graves got the green folks together, again they weren't called green, but when you put them together into groups, they would solve problems together, for class. They were so careful about hearing from everybody. They were really nice. They wanted to hear every person's opinion. Couldn't make a decision, couldn't get started. Nobody could take a leadership position. Nobody could step into that role. Orange, on the other hand, when you organize them, they all fought for it. They would, very cutthroat, competitive kind of situation. Green's downside is death by consensus. We can't make a decision. But it's a very pleasant, humane kind of a place to work. So here you're starting to actually see the manifesto make sense, individuals and interactions. Oh yeah, betcha, open processes and tools, customer collaboration over time. Yes, sir. Teal, I call adaptive Agile because this is really what Agile is about. Agile fundamentally is a Teal kind of an idea, related to complex adaptive systems and so forth. And Teal is a systemic orientation. It's seeing things in a very different way than other people have seen it. And actually, let me show you that. Let me skip that for a minute. So look at this. These are kind of functions in an organization. And this is a typical orange organization. Just read that list and see if that looks familiar for your own organization. Can you read it okay? So how many people this looks pretty much like your organization? So look at this is now this list, this book, Reinventing Organizations, Frederick Lello, is a study of Teal organizations, a very detailed study of what does a Teal organization look like. So self-organizing teams, coaches with no management authority. Does that sound familiar? No project managers, people self-staff projects. The teams interview people. We don't have job titles, we have fluid, granular roles. We focus on team performance, not on individual performance. And there's no real promotion, we just rearrange things with peer agreement. How many people this looks like your company, or sounds like your company? How many people want this to sound like your company? Ha ha! That's the red pill. So back here. Remember this. It's not going to happen, or it's unlikely. It's very unlikely that any given organization that's already organized mostly in an orange kind of a place is just going to magically change. In fact, what Lello found, what Lello found was that that the essential component was that the CEO was at a Teal level of development, him or herself, and that the board was. Because even when there's parts of the organization that rise up and start to self-organize or create a more Teal expression, that was eventually quashed because it became in conflict with the fundamental value system that drove the organization. Now that doesn't mean that you don't throw out trial balloons and see what happens with given practices, because, sure, maybe there's, also think back to that distribution. That is probably the distribution within the company. So just because the organization is organized at orange doesn't mean there's not plenty of green people. In fact, as we've done this talk, Lisa and I and Michael Hammond, at various places, we've come to see how much Agile coaches resonate at green or at teal. I mean, they just don't resonate at orange. That's not, they were attracted to Agile, you were attracted to Agile because you're more in the green teal space. That's what makes sense to you. That's what you're seeing coming in. And you're right, that's what's happening evolutionarily. There's no question that that's where things are going. Think about when all these white guys that own companies now are dead or retired. Anybody have teenagers? Teenagers are organized in a different way. Would you agree? They are not gonna work for companies that are paternalistic, that expect them to do crazy ass things, and they're just not. I mean, my teenagers are at least have developed to green, if not teal, already. Yeah.
Can you name some examples of actual teal companies today?
Yeah, but you won't have heard of them, most of them.
Yeah.
One of them that I think is in that space is WL Gore. You heard of WL Gore, Gore-Tex? Actually, they've been around for a heck of a long time, 50 years. They don't have any managers. Nobody can tell somebody else what to do there. Zappos is, doing a famous experiment, moving to a governance system called a holacracy.
Menlo.
Huh?
Menlo?
Yeah, maybe Menlo Innovations?
Elred.
Yeah, maybe.
Elred, Dove Stephens Company.
I don't know that.
We're book called How.
Valve, maybe? A company that you've probably never heard of, I had, called Bertzorg in the Netherlands, that has that moved from a model of all my typical medical model. They're a home care delivery system, and typical well, you got 3 minutes to do this procedure, and 15 minutes to do this one, and you're a specialist in this, and you're a specialist in something else, and we don't actually kind of care about the patient as a person. We do our little piece of the thing. And they got a new CEO and rearranged it out, the whole company. I mean, we're talking 10,000 people. It's not like a trivial, it's easy to do this with 5 people. Doing it with 10,000 people is like, they have hundreds of self-organized teams. They do all their own hiring, they make all their own decisions, and they have almost no turnover, because who would want to leave that?
Semco, Richard Semler in Brazil.
Yeah, I likely in that, so without, saying right here, yes, definitely in that space. The people that we hold up, Semco, Richard Semler.
Maverick book people.
Okay, so let's hold that in the background, because there's, there's more. So this is also from Spiral Dynamics. This is Graves's, and then Don Beck and Chris Cowan, afternoon students that published his work posthumously. This has to do with the change state, because remember that this gets driven by life conditions that force change, right? So an alpha state is when things are going well, no problem, the environment works, our value mean works. Beta is when it starts not work. The first reaction of any system is, let's do more of the same. Let's do what we've done, always, just smarter or better or more intensely or whatever. Gamma is when things start to crash and things really, really don't work and people are starting to freak out. And so there's a change process here, and I'm not going to, the point is not to go into the detail of this, but to think about, again, back to the idea of where's the client. So one piece is what level, organization, program, team. Another piece is what altitude are they developmentally? What are they resonating with? What part of the spiral are they lighting up? Yeah.
This also looks like Virginia Satir's change model a little bit for individual humans.
Yeah, I mean, many change models have some quality like this. To me, this is about the most sophisticated one. It's got much more nuance than most models do that I'm not
Exposing now.
that I'm not exposing now, exactly. So there's some kind of assessment that you need of what's the state of, how unhappy is the client with their circumstances, essentially. How bad is the pain, and how much are they in a loop of they can't see what really is the pain or what really is the cause of the pain, and they're just doing the same thing over and over again, and how much are they in some like major crisis and they realize that the whole thing doesn't work and the whole system is collapsing on some level, and that makes them, of course, more ripe for change. It also, there's all kind of, downsides or possibles of just going into a gamma trap, it's called, for a long time.
I have a side question. You mentioned earlier that it was unlikely for an organization to reach a teal state unless the CEO and the board were also there. Do you agree that it would also be the same case for even a green state, that really the leadership...
Yeah, the leadership will cap whatever developmental level of the organization, almost certainly. And yeah, definitely. Okay, so that's another, what change state is the client in, or some part of the client. All right, so let's go to tools for a minute. So this whole framework is adapted from something called integral theory. Integral theory was created by a man named Ken Wilber, great American philosopher. And at this point, integral movement is sort of like the Agile movement. It's all over the world. It's got thousands of practitioners. Probably not as many as Agile because it's not, Agile has such a clear business proposition that it solves that it's spread quite virally. But there are thousands of integral practitioners around the world, and tackling an integral perspective on all kinds of fields. And this is my adaptation to the Agile world. So, 4 perspectives that you can think about. Very simply, I, we, it, and its. First, second, and third person. Subjective, interior, objective, exterior. So that's a psychological perspective on things. That's a behavioral or a product or a process perspective, a cultural perspective, and a systems perspective. And the thing about this is that different tools are biased toward different quadrants. They believe that the perspectives, the methodologies, the truth claims of this perspective are the right ones. Or they just are choosing to be there. And guess what? If you're going to actually be complex as the world is, you have to take all 4 perspectives at some point, because they're all 4 true, always. They're all 4. You can always look at something from my internal perspective, from what does my behavior look like from the outside, from what is our mental model, what is our shared vision together, what's the system that we're in altogether. You can always take all 4 of those. So, the I methodologies are things like meditation or journaling, reflection, solitude. There's huge power in those things. Now, business has dismissed things like that by and large, but actually they're being totally rediscovered now. It's like this is the secret. Here you have controls and statistics and measurements and targets and numerical kind of quantification. Now, people that have moved into green start discounting this. They start to, that's too numerical. That's too impersonal, right? But it's a hugely valuable perspective. Didn't do that. The we perspective, culture studies, culture typologies, whatever. Thinking about our mental models, investigating what mental models do we have together that actually limit what we can do. What shared values do we have? Or how can we create a shared vision? That's a methodology that would work from the we point of view. And its is systems thinking, lean thinking, kind of fundamentally is a pretty its perspective. So you can see that all those could be useful, and that any given tool is likely to choose one of those. is likely to have one of those biases. So these are some tools that we see in the Agile world. So I'll just give you a second to look at that. Any favorites you want to highlight or?
All of them.
Yeah. They've all got use, and probably your organization or your implementation is going to choose one or two of them, and probably in the same quadrant most likely, or possibly. So the whole model looks like this, and these are my names and focal areas in a enterprise context. You know, this quadrant is about leadership. This quadrant is about you know, how we do. Ryan's talk, Ryan's keynote was largely in this quadrant. It was largely about how products can be you know, better having a system. Well, actually, it was in both of these quadrants. With some hints in, like, you know, the empathy part is here and here. But most of it was really good. But it was also, what level do you think it was at? What altitude was he coming from in his talk? What do you think? That's the amber, orange, green, teal.
Teal.
What do you think? Yeah, teal. He was very much coming from a teal, you know. So a typical product process is, you know, well, I mean, like Ford, you know, you can have any color as long as it's black. I mean, he didn't care what you wanted. He had a manufacturing process, a right way that drove everything about, you know, his distribution and, you know, his relationship to the customer. You know, Steve Jobs, I don't know, maybe in this kind of spectrum. You know, Teal is this more self-organization, more high customer feedback, more wisdom of the whole, more crowdsourcing. It's a different way of thinking. And there's a lot, the point of this is that evolution happens at different paces in the 4 quadrants. So what we have, there's a lot of stuff in the Agile world that is in this teal kind of range, or the green teal kind of range, particularly on this side, that makes a lot of sense, that sounds good to executives, but then becomes really hard because both the interior structures of leaders and of us, frankly, and of our culture are not a match. They're, you know, we're trying to put, you know, teal kinds of processes into orange-green organizations, and it's just not a match. It doesn't work very well. Let's see. Oops, I left that in there twice. So this is kind of a map of tools. So, you know, talking about having a more flat organization structure, that's an its perspective that's appropriate at a green level. Talking about holacracy is an its perspective also that's at a teal level. So if I don't know Zappos well enough to know, I suspect that Zappos might really have a chance at implementing holacracy, but Cisco, not a chance in hell. You know what I'm saying? So don't go introduce holacracy into Cisco as the latest governance structure. Mismatch in a big way. Let's see. You know, leadership at this level is going to be reactive. Reactive meaning I'm going to choose what I do to solve problems and to make stuff go away to make myself feel in control or look good. Not I'm going to do it out of a outcome-based, a vision-based approach that requires more internal complexity on my part, more emotional intelligence on my part. To choose that, you're going to be going up into this range, high achiever catalyst in Bill Joyner's terms.
If you're going to cover this, just tell me. But I'm curious if
Not much more time.
Okay. I'm curious if how you overcome this. I mean, my first line of thinking was go convince the oranges to evolve, because I'm over here in teal and I'd like you to come over here to teal. Otherwise, we're not going to be successful.
Yeah.
Is that the approach, or are you resigning yourself to, nope, we're going to be stuck with your limited view of the world because you signed the checks and you're orange?
The basic message of this talk actually is just the question you're pointing to, what's your motivation? So if your motivation is to, if our motivation as coaches is to change other people, we're unlikely to be happy, and we're likely to, like teaching a pig to sing, you frustrate yourself and annoy the pig. It's unlikely to happen because organization, you know, it takes a person 5 years or so to move from one level to the next. Organizations, pretty unlikely to necessarily ever go up without a significant change of leadership. So to me, the takeaway of this is, you know, what's your motivation? If it's to help the willing change, you know, great. I mean, you throw out something, you know, a practice, an idea, internal leadership thing from a certain place, and you see what happens as a diagnostic. Well, does it take? But you don't fight when it doesn't, because that's diagnostic of, oh, that's orange thinking, that's amber thinking, you know, whatever. Okay, so now I know in spiral dynamics there's a concept of being a spiral wizard, meaning you can talk the language of amber to amber people. You can talk the language of orange without, you know, being patronizing or whatever. You kind of get, you know, we all went through each of those places. I mean, I had a recent, couple of years ago, like a reinitiation of my orange. You know, went to a lot of, you know, Millionaire Mind kind of seminars and stuff, and like reawakened my own orange quality to not like dismiss that or marginalize it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And yet, I mean, that's not where I think I live, but when we judge and dismiss those other value memes, we're not likely to be very successful. We're likely
Well, that's
to be very
kind of
frustrated.
where I'm confused, because if these other colors are I don't want to say dismissing, but let's putting weight on the wrong side of the Agile manifesto, and we're coming at it from Teal, and we're being hired to help transform these organizations. It's like you want to say to them, look, you want to be Teal, you're never going to be there, I'm not the right guy, see you later.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But also, some people can be happy with, because there's going to be people organized at green in those organizations, there's going to be people organized, few organized at Teal, that, you know, maybe there's some, you know, like frankly, when we teach classes, sometimes our best outcome is helping people leave their job. I mean, that's not our intent, but that is what happens sometimes with the work that we do, is they see, this is not, I do not want to be in that environment. Now, on the other hand, it's like the little girl and the starfish. You know, you can't save the whole, you know, beach of starfish. She throws one back, made a difference to that one. If that motivation can be satisfying to you, and it's clearly where this planet is going. There's no question that you're the vanguards of you're the leaders of the future. That's why you're attracted to this new evolving paradigm. And it's not going to work everywhere very quickly. It's going to work in some places, and other people are going to coalesce around groups, and they're going to move out and start their own companies, or, you know, move to Zappos, or to, you know, Valve, or to Bertzorg, or, you know, somewhere.
Or start up their own.
And there's all kinds of room for horizontal growth. So vertical growth is very difficult. It's difficult enough for individuals, and, you know, part of it is talk about that. Oh no. Well, no, I'm not sliding that. Is growing, you know, the focus on yourself. The best thing that you can do for your clients, in my estimation, is to raise your own development level. Because then you have more internal complexity, you have more leadership capacity, you have less need to attach to that you're going to change them for your sake, for your own ego's sake, you know, because I want them to be different. And you're going to be more open to the people that want to change that you really can't help. Spade's first law of organizational change is only go where you're wanted. Resistance is a message. So maybe it's somebody is struggling with something, and maybe you can, through some coaching skills, some listening, you can help them into finding their own blocks and finding their own motivation. But you're not going to give them motivation. And that's just, for me, that's just our ego getting in the way of, we want them to be different. We want them to be a certain way that validates us somehow.
Question for amber, orange, and green. Is there a concise message or promise or motivation that you might share with each one of these groups? So for instance, I think the orange team, you might say, well, look, if you get to green, you're going to make a lot more money because your teams are going to do much more higher performance. Do you feel like you've got a concise elevator pitch for migrating up to the next level?
Well, remember, so the first issue is diagnosing, are they truly unhappy with their life condition? So I would speak to them within their own language. You can improve your technical skills and be a better developer. I mean, this is a, so a person in orange is going to be motivated by competition, by being better, by, some level of excellence. I mean, not people at other levels, but that's going to be, and with external rewards often. I mean, that's what's going to motivate them. And horizontal growth, which I say is always fair, is becoming a healthier version of orange or a healthier version of green. So for instance, the whole compensation mismatch in the corporate world, the financial industry greed disaster. That's not healthy. There's nothing healthy about that. But you don't have to push up to a higher level to deal with that. I mean, there's within that value system, there's a lack of parity and the next person. So thank you so much. Hope it's been useful to you. Feel free to talk to me in the changeover or ask me questions or give me feedback.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask that there's a retrospective chart there, so as you go to the room to get your refreshments, if you could use dot voting and just put one dot where you feel that how you felt about this